At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, Canadians pause to reflect and remember, honoring those who have served and remembering those we have lost. On Monday, live from the National War Memorial in Ottawa, join CBC News for special coverage of the Remembrance Day ceremony on radio, TV, CBC News Network, and on CBC Gem, CBC Explore, and local streaming channels.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg. At noon, it's sunny and 3 degrees downtown. It's 3 in Brandon and -1 in Thompson. With polling stations opening up across the country, today is Election Day in the United States.
Who's going to approve open borders with criminals pouring into our country by the millions? No, they have to cheat. They have to cheat, and they do it very well, actually.
Claiming once again that voter fraud is the only thing that can prevent his return to the White House, that is Donald Trump speaking last night in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was his final speech of the campaign. Trump is now in Florida, where he will watch the results come in tonight. As for Kamala Harris, she closed out her campaign in Philadelphia and is now in Washington. Ashley Burke has more.
Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign says they have multiple paths to hit 270 electoral votes, which is what they need to win. But their most direct way would be to claim victory over what they call the blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Harris was there last night in Philadelphia and expressed optimism she could win, but she also said it could be one of the closest races in history. And she told voters she was offering them a clean break from the Trump era of politics that she says is driven by division and fear.
America is ready for a fresh start where we see our fellow American not as an enemy, but as a neighbor.
Harris is going to be here in Washington today, where her campaign has also set up a stage, stands, a jumbotron at Howard University. It's her alma mater, one of the U.S.'s historically Black colleges and universities, and where she's hoping to make history as the first graduate of one of these schools to become president. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Washington.
And here in Canada, the Trudeau government says it is prepared for any election result.
We've dealt with the Obama administration, we've dealt with the Trump administration, and we've dealt with the Biden administration. And through that also, we dealt through different types of Congress.
That is Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly. Kirsten Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the U.S., says no matter the candidates, every American election is important because the United States is central to the Canadian economic prosperity. And CBC Radio will have live coverage of the U.S. election tonight starting at 7 p.m. Central Time. Organizers of this year's street census hope it can help make a positive change for Winnipeg's homeless population. Starting tomorrow, close to 200 volunteers will fan out across Winnipeg to do a point-in-time or pit count of the city's homeless. For the first time since the surveys began in 2015, volunteers will be talking to people over the course of 4 days, not just one. Volunteer Ash Burkowski has lived experience being homeless. They say it's not just a collection of numbers.
The pit count is powerful because it can give us a picture of what is really happening. When I was homeless, I felt invisible and like I didn't matter. This count makes sure that people going through the most difficult time of their lives aren't invisible.
Organizers say the count can help identify gaps in the services out there for people experiencing homelessness. The results of the survey are expected in the spring. A group that helps the city's vulnerable worries it could end up homeless itself next year if the city doesn't renew its lease. This week, city councillors vote on a one-year extension on its agreement with St. Boniface StreetLinks to lease 604 St. Mary's Road for $1. It has been using the former city building not only as an emergency shelter, but also a drop-in center and for transition hospital beds. StreetLinks head Marion Willis says the city's ultimate plan is to turn the site into affordable housing.
We're still living with the uncertainty of not really having a secure place, knowing what the future holds. And by the way, our lease will expire in November of 2025, just when the snow's going to fly again.
Willis says it's counterintuitive to displace her program for affordable housing units her clients can't afford. Former fashion mogul Peter Nygaard has asked an Ontario court today to review a decision to deny him bail as he appeals his sexual assault convictions and sentence. Nygaard's legal team argues the motions judge made several errors in dismissing the 83-year-old's bail application last month. Among other things, his lawyers say the motions judge unfairly discounted the value of a new medical report. The judge who rejected Nygaard's bail application wrote at the time his appeal appeared to be weak, adding he is a flight risk since he faces charges in other jurisdictions, including Winnipeg. Tributes continue to pour in for Murray Sinclair, who passed yesterday. Chief Justice Glenn Joyal says he will remember the former head of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, first Indigenous judge, and senator in a number of ways. Joyal was a colleague of Sinclair's as a lawyer on the bench. He describes Sinclair as a national historic figure. But Joyal says he was also a mentor who helped bring forward the concept of reconciliation.
He took advantage of those moments of profile to nourish a new generation of Indigenous lawyers, judges, and activists. But it wasn't just the Indigenous citizens of Canada; it was others.
Joyal says Sinclair had monumental impact on Canada as a whole, but also on those in the legal community and his family. And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 12:30.
Good afternoon and welcome to Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. It is December the 5th, an auspicious day, sunny day here, auspicious day in the States, could be auspicious for the whole world. We'll be keeping an eye on those things. In fact, we'll be talking with the CBC reporter Karen Pauls in Washington on what she's seeing just in the past hour. Also on our call-in today, Quebec now allows advanced directives requesting medical assistance in dying cases, like with dementia, for instance, where a person might be incapable of giving consent at a later date. What do you think about those sorts of advanced directives? We want to know. Give us a call, 204-780-0893. But first, we're going to talk with CBC reporter Karen Pauls in Washington. It's a tight race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, with polls putting them neck and neck. CBC News will bring analysis and results throughout the evening. And just this past hour, I spoke with CBC reporter Karen Pauls in Washington, D.C. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
So tell us about the mood there today.
Well, you know, Washington, D.C. leans Democratic, so there's a lot of excitement here about Vice President Kamala Harris. I was at her closing speech last week at the Ellipse, me and about 75,000 other people, and it was very exciting. People were thrilled to be there. There was a loud pro-Palestinian protest on the street, but way much more support for her. And the people I've spoken to, you know, in cabs and at coffee shops feel a sense of optimism, but also a bit of foreboding and dread. I think people here are concerned about potential violence in the coming days, maybe a repeat of the 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol by Trump supporters. I was walking around yesterday and saw that there are a lot more barricades up. There's more police presence, businesses near the Capitol and the White House boarded up. Police say they're ready for anything that may come up during this election week.
So how exactly are the election officials and law enforcement dealing with actual threats and disinformation?
Right. Well, on the threat side, the National Guard has been dispatched to many states. At some polling stations, there are metal detectors and police officers. Law enforcement is using drones in some cases to monitor activity around polling places, and there are even snipers on standby for deployment, if you can believe that. Disinformation is harder. Some election officials have been pushing back against videos and posts online saying that they're wrong, that this is foreign interference, that it could be Russian troll farms. Some have printed out fact sheets for election workers in case they need them. But there's also a lot of concern over the social media site X, formerly Twitter, which of course is owned by Donald Trump supporter Elon Musk. And he's been retweeting and posting things, amplifying them, even if they're not entirely accurate. So that's been a little harder to get at.
Yeah. Sounds bizarre. Well, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are voting today, and Vance spoke with reporters. What was his message?
You know, J.D. Vance struck a very conciliatory tone when he voted in Cincinnati this morning. Take a listen to this clip.
We do expect to win, but obviously no matter who wins, half the country, as you said, is going to be at least partially disappointed. I think my attitude is the best way to heal the rift in the country is to try to govern the country as well as we can, create as much prosperity as we can for the American people, and remind our fellow Americans that we are all fundamentally on the same team, however we voted. I certainly hope you vote for Donald J. Trump today. I think that his policies are going to promote peace and prosperity for our citizens. But if you vote the wrong way, in my view, I'm still going to love you. I'm still going to treat you as a fellow citizen. And if I am lucky enough to be your vice president, I'm going to fight hard for your dreams and for your family over the next 4 years.
Well, and Lori, that is a big, big change from his tone on the campaign trail. Listen to this clip from just yesterday.
The citizens of this country are not garbage for wanting to be able to afford groceries and a nice place to live. But in 2 days, we are going to take out the trash in Washington, D.C., and the trash's name is Kamala Harris.
Lori, you know, the Trump and Vance campaign has gotten increasingly dark. They're using dehumanizing language to describe migrants. They're calling the Democrats a demonic party. They're musing about putting political rivals in front of firing squads. It goes on and on.
And what are you hearing from Kamala Harris?
You know, she's had to refute and rebut some of that, but in the last few days, she's really focused on the optimism of her campaign and the future, telling young voters, I see your power and I'm so proud of you. Here's an example of her pitch from yesterday.
So, America, we started this campaign 107 days ago. And from the beginning, ours has not been a fight against something. It has been a fight for something. A fight for a future with freedom, with opportunity, and with dignity for all Americans. Our campaign has brought together people from all corners of this nation and from all walks of life, united by our love for our country and our faith in a brighter, stronger, and more hopeful future that we will build together. And tonight, then we finish as we started, with optimism, with energy, with joy, knowing that we, the people, have the power to shape our future, and that we can confront any challenge we face when we do it together.
So you can hear some very different choices for Americans to make.
Very different choices. So, Karen, what key swing states should we be watching?
You know, there are 7. Pennsylvania is arguably the most important. It's hard to win the White House without Pennsylvania because it has the most electoral votes of all the swing states, 19. It was most visited by both candidates. It was the place where Trump was shot at last summer. And it was one of the last states to be called in 2020, 4 days after the election. So don't expect a fast outcome there. Michigan is another. Joe Biden flipped it in 2020 by nearly 3 percentage points, but Harris might have a harder time doing that because Michigan's Muslim and Arab American communities are not happy with the administration's response to Israel's war in Gaza. Arizona is another key battleground. 2 voting groups there could be deciding who wins the state. Latino voters, who make up a third of the state's population, and right-leaning independent voters who used to consistently vote Republican. Georgia took center stage in 2020, flipping blue for the first time in nearly 30 years. It's now back in play, though, after it appeared to be lost to Democrats when Joe Biden was leading the ticket. To Nevada, Republicans haven't won it since 2004, but it has moved to the right relative to the nation. And because of the state's tourism industry, that issue of ending taxes on tips is important here. North Carolina is one of the most evenly divided in the country. Barack Obama won the state in 2008, but Republicans have won it narrowly every election since. And finally, Wisconsin has been decided by less than 1 percentage point on the presidential level in the last 4 of 6 presidential elections. Trump and Harris are poised for a photo finish once again, just like we're expecting in a lot of other places.
Well, that's a lot of states to watch, but what else should we be watching for?
You know, it's going to be interesting to see how things go as the polls close from the east to the west. The final polls close in Hawaii at 2 a.m. Eastern time and in Alaska at 1 a.m. Eastern. The earliest we could know a winner is about 12:01 Eastern, but with such a close election, it's expected to take a lot longer. And here's an interesting thing. If you look at the map of the United States, Trump's votes come in early and first, some of the biggest states that support him. Harris's support have polls that close much later in California, for example, at 11 o'clock Eastern. So this is something called the red mirage and the blue shift. The red mirage refers to early votes that favor Republicans. The blue shift happens when mail ballots are counted, which takes longer, or ballots in more densely populated urban areas that favor the Democrats compared to those smaller rural precincts that lean Republican. So in 2020, Trump used the red mirage to allege there was voter fraud. He claimed victory at 2 a.m. on election night when at least half a dozen battleground states hadn't been called yet. And it was eventually called, this election, for Biden on November 7th, after his win in Pennsylvania put him over the 270 electoral votes needed. Georgia and North Carolina weren't called until November 19th and November 13th. So the bottom line in an election this close, with polls showing Trump and Harris polling within less than 2 points of each other in all 7 of those battlegrounds, the race may not be called today. Federal law does require states to complete their recounts and resolve any disputes, though, by December 11th, Lori.
Oh, every nerve stretched to breaking point. Thank you very much, Karen, for being with us.
You're welcome.
Reporter Karen Paul's in Washington, D.C. this morning. She's part of CBC's America Votes team. David Cochran and the Power and Politics team will be broadcasting live from D.C. at 5 p.m. And at 8 p.m., Adrian Arsenault will be joined by Ian Hannamansing, Paul Hunter, and Rosemary Barton for analysis and the latest updates. And you can catch all the coverage on CBC News Network, CBC Gem, and on cbc.ca. And coming up next on Radio Noon, we'll hear from voters in North Dakota about how they're feeling about the election and what the result could mean for them.
Breaking this hour, CBC News brings you all the local, national, and international news you need to make sense of your world.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement.
Now's your chance to enjoy a free preview of Canada's source for breaking and live news.
The air raid sirens went off.
Find out why more Canadians choose CBC News Network over any other Canadian news channel. The CBC News Network free preview, on now.
You're listening to Radio Noon. I'm Lori Hoog-Stratton. It's a beautiful day out there, sunny, and we're going for a high of 6 degrees. Nice to see the sunshine on November 5th. A good day for an election. A good day to have a Guy Fawkes bonfire. A good day for my sister's birthday. Yes, we're going for 6 degrees under sunny skies. Tonight, it will remain clear with increasing cloudiness overnight and a bit of a breeze at 15 in the Winnipeg area. Down to 7. And tomorrow, mainly cloudy, just 3 degrees tomorrow. Thursday warms up again to 6. Friday is 9 in the Winnipeg area. Saturday, 11. Autumn is back. Sunday is 6. In the Brandon region today, a high of 8 degrees. And tomorrow in the Brandon region, only 4 degrees. Thursday looks nice, sunny and windy, and 8. And on Friday, 8 as well. In Thompson today, there's a chance of flurries and highs of +2 down to -8 tonight. And on Wednesday in Thompson, highs of -1. Thursday, highs of 8. In Churchill, in the north, periods of snow, blowing snow at times, up to 2 centimeters. The winds are strong, 50 kilometers an hour, gusting to 70, with the temperature falling to -3. Some temperatures for you right now. In Brandon, it's 3, Churchill -2, Dauphin is 4, in Gimli, it's 3, and in Winnipeg right now, it's 6 degrees. It's 19 minutes after 12 o'clock. You're listening to CBC Radio Noon at 89.3 FM, 990 AM. Many Manitobans have taken a drive down I-29, passing small hamlets and communities along the way. And it's a trip CBC host Marcy Marcusa and associate producer Corey Funk made yesterday. They took the opportunity to get off the interstate and went into the town of Grafton, home to about 4,100 people. That's where they found 3 voters with very different hopes for today's historic election. The first person they found is Rita Beneda. She retired from a career in banking and has 3 children and 13 grandchildren. She's lived in North Dakota her whole life and calls the nearby community of Park River home. Rita Beneda was shopping for groceries at Hugo Supermarket in Grafton when she stopped to talk to Marcy.
I voted Trump all the way. I am total Republican. My main reason for voting Republican, I guess, is abortion. I am not for abortion at all, no matter in what way. I mean, I understand some of their thinking, but it's not my health care that I want, is abortion. No. So.
You said you've always voted Republican, but when I asked how you voted, the first thing you said was Trump and not Republican.
Oh,
Has the party changed, do you think?
I don't think so. I think it's stayed the same. I know a lot of people don't agree with what he says a lot of the time. He is blunt. He says it to the point. But I feel he's for the people more so than just women's rights. The baby doesn't have any rights.
Obviously, abortion's the big issue for you. But what other policies spoke to you when you think of your life here in North Dakota?
Rural issues, I think, are a big deciding factor. Trump will get oil back in process. I mean, he'll get us on our own instead of being dependent on other countries.
There are a lot of women that have taken exception, to some of the things Donald Trump has said. I think most recently saying he'd be the protector of women, whether they like it or not, was one of the comments. How does all of that sit with you?
It sits okay with me. I think, like I said, I think he rattles off at the mouth a lot, but I think when it comes down to it, he's going to be there for the people. He's well-rounded. I mean, he's not just for women's rights, and that's the other thing I think Kamala's got going for her right now.
You said rural a couple times. So there's something about either the Democrats and Kamala Harris that not speaking maybe to you rurally.
I think they are more big city.
What's the mood been like leading up to this?
It's been more openly, I think, this time around. People are more willing to say they're going to vote one way or the other than hide it.
Were people hiding it in the last time around?
I think so. I know one of the candidates said you don't have to be open about what you vote for. I mean, to me, that's not right. I think that you need to be open of what you stand for. Family against family is what it comes down to.
That was Rita Beneda from Park River, North Dakota. Marcy also met up with a person throwing all of the predictions for today out the window. That's because John D. Demeester is going to decide at the ballot box who will get his vote. He spoke with Marcy as he was sweeping up leaves on the sidewalk outside his workplace.
You better hope it doesn't get windy again. You're going to continue sweeping the leaves all day.
Yeah. I'm about up here about every day too.
And do you live here in Grafton?
Live right here in Grafton. I been working with Ag Country Farm Credit for about 46 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I've lived here at Grafton since 1942. My boys and I, they lost their mother at age 55. They have told me, since we lost our mom, you have treated us like a mother and a father because you've been that close to us. Wow. My youngest one is 59. The oldest one is 61.
So how old are you now, sir?
No, I mean, just turned 87.
You going to vote or have you voted already?
No, I'm going to vote. Yeah.
And what are you thinking about? What party do you support?
Well, actually, I am a nonpartisan. You rather weigh it out both ways. There is good and a lot of good and very a lot of good about Harris as far as trying to hold the economy down for people. I'm still undecided yet before I get there.
Wow.
Ready?
It's tomorrow.
It's that touchy for me.
Wow.
I mean, I'll possibly make up my mind when I'm standing in the line ready to go in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you're in the ballot box tomorrow, what kinds of things will you be thinking about?
Even though I'm 87 years old, I do feel that, they've got to start getting more younger people in Congress and start going along with that age limit and disqualifying a lot of the older people away from the table.
Okay. Now, is that a comment on Donald Trump's age, or are you talking about something else? I'm just making sure I understand what you're saying.
That's including Donald Trump. If Harris does get in, there are a lot of things that she had forwarded over to her from Biden that I did not like.
Give me an example of one.
A lot of this money that had been going over to other countries and helping other countries. Don't you suppose, people, that we should have a lot of that aid right here in our own country?
So then if you're in the ballot box tomorrow and you're thinking about what you don't like about Trump.
Well, he would be good in many ways. The other way, with that wall of bringing everybody coming over to our country, you get so many thousands of people over from there from any other country, the wages for our young people are going to be cut and lowered in order to support the people, immigrants coming over here.
So you have a huge worry about immigration. What don't you like about Trump?
What I don't like about him is the fact that he talks out of turn too much. Too much. There's too much slamming going on onto others. This idea of slamming has cut Trump down on a lot of votes coming in. He's asked for it because his mouth has run away with him. Yeah. I do feel that Harris does have a lot better mannerism by far, and I think I'm just about making up my mind right now talking to you about which way it might be going.
That was John D. DeMeester. Meanwhile, Corey Funk was nearby, meeting up with Jessie Van Camp. She cast an early ballot, and it's actually from East Grand Forks, Minnesota. Corey noticed her license plate when she was pumping gas.
I voted for Kamala Harris because she's not a tyrant and she's competent, and I just think that she could do wonderful things for our country. She focuses on bringing people together. Obviously, reproductive rights are super important to me. Both of my children were born through IVF, and so I would hate to see that lost for other people. Not to mention the dangers of not being in control of your health care. That's just horrendous for any person. I'm a lawyer, and I don't like seeing what the Supreme Court has done. It's just changed the entire legal landscape of our country since the conservative majority took over. So.
What's it meant for your community? What's it like in your community ahead of the election in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, right now?
I try not to engage with people that are not open to real discussion because I am surrounded mostly by conservatives, and I think that the scariest part of this for me, there are some that I talk to. My dad specifically is a Trump voter, and so. There are people that I have had longer conversations with about it, and I think the scariest thing for me is that the people that are voting for him, like the people that are educated and usually weigh decisions very carefully and things like that, those people are voting for him because they don't believe that he'll do the things he says he's going to do. They're so used to him lying. I feel like when Roe was overturned, I felt like my chosen profession, like it betrayed me. It's been a hard couple of years.
Might be a little while till we know who is president. Might not necessarily be Wednesday morning. We know, but when you do find out if it is Trump or Kamala, like what do you think moving forward is going to look like for you and your family? Like you said, your dad's a Trump supporter. What do you think life is going to look like for you with either outcome?
I think that if Kamala wins, I'm scared about the immediate aftermath. What will happen with Trump supporters? My dad is not one of these people that's, going to go out and cause violence and things like that. But I am concerned about what happens in the Capitol. But outside of that, I hope that moving forward, if she wins, everybody can kind of look back on this and say, yeah, what were we thinking? And we can maybe get back to a middle road of politics, because the extreme sides on both sides, I don't think they represent the vast majority of people in our country. If Donald Trump wins, I don't know. I applied for my passport expedited last week. I had gotten my children's earlier this year. it really is not out of the question for me. If I feel that I'm not safe or that my kids aren't safe, I would leave.
Where would you go? Canada?
I would start with Canada, yeah. We're just 3 hours from the border, actually an hour from the border, 3 hours from Winnipeg, so I would start there.
That was Jesse Van Camp in conversation with Corey Funk in Grafton, North Dakota. Marcy and Corey will be live tomorrow on Information Radio with an election special from Fargo. CBC will be covering the U.S. election all day today and tomorrow. And you can tune in here on CBC Radio or go to our website, cbc.ca/news, or check out one of our TV channels. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Josh Crabb in Winnipeg at 12:30. It's partly cloudy and 4 downtown, 7 in McCreary, and -4 in Dooley Lake. After months of campaigning, it is finally Election Day in the United States. Millions have already voted early, and millions more are descending on polling locations today. Karen Pauls has a look from Washington.
Just been very honored to find out that the lines are long.
Among those voting today, the Republican candidates for president and vice president, Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. Trump says he's confident.
No, I ran a great campaign. I think it was maybe the best of the three. So of course there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people. I don't have to tell them that.
Vice President Kamala Harris is in Washington getting briefings and doing some radio interviews. Her running mate, Tim Walz, made a final campaign stop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
We're going to be coming in. Keep in mind, we have the fairest.
Vance and Trump will watch the election results from Mar-a-Lago. Harris will host an election watch party on the campus where she went to school at Howard University. With the race so tight, results could be slow to come in, with the winner not guaranteed today. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Washington.
The 2024 Winnipeg Street Census hopes by expanding to 4 days it will get a better snapshot of homelessness in the city. Tomorrow, close to 200 volunteers will begin the process of going out across the city to speak with people and get their stories. What is collected will help address gaps in services and look at root causes. Ash Brakowski is a volunteer who has lived experience. They say the point in time, or pit count, will give valuable insight.
This is a chance to make sure policies aren't just made for people, but with people who have lived through these experiences. Nothing about us without us. With the pit count data, we can guide decision makers to see the many facets of this issue and help create effective solutions that really work.
Results from the survey are expected in the spring. And the head of St. Boniface Street Links is concerned about the future. This week, a city committee will vote on whether to continue a short-term agreement that would allow the group to lease 604 St. Mary's Road for $1. That expires in November of 2025. Right now, Street Links uses the building for a 20-bed hospital transition unit, drop-in center, and a winter emergency shelter. Marion Willis says their future is uncertain because the city has plans to build affordable housing on the site.
It seems pretty counterintuitive to displace or make homeless the organization that works to prevent homelessness, to make us and the people we serve homeless in exchange for building affordable housing units.
Willis says the building is perfect for her group's needs and is having a positive impact on the people it serves. And that is CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local news is at 1:30.
Thank you very much, Josh.
You're welcome.
You're listening to CBC Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. Taking a look at the weather. Oh, first I'm going to mention, though, give us a call when I'm finished doing the weather because I didn't get a chance to mention it before the news. Today we are talking about how Quebec is now allowing advanced directives requesting medical assistance in dying in cases, say, like dementia, for instance, where a person might be incapable of giving consent at a later date. We want to know what you think about that. And we also want to inform people about healthcare directives and end-of-life care in general. So do give us a call, 204-780-0893, and let us know what you think about whether the rules around access to medical assistance in dying, should they be changed? Should they be put forward in some way, rolled back in some way? Let us know, 204-780-0893. And now we'll take a look at the weather. In Winnipeg today, sunny and highs of 6 degrees, increasing cloudiness overnight, winds up to 15 kilometers an hour, and the wind chill, they're talking about wind chills now, -7. Never mind, I didn't say that. On Wednesday, mainly cloudy and highs of +3. Thursday looks sunny and 6, and just looking ahead to the weekend, it's going to be 9 on Friday and 11 on Saturday. That sounds pretty nice. And then 6 on Sunday. In the Brandon region today, sunny and highs of 8. The winds becoming northeast at 20 and down to 0 in Brandon, and a cloudy day on Wednesday for Brandon with highs of +4. In Thompson, 30% chance of flurries near noon today. That's now. Highs near +2. And on Wednesday, cloudy in the Thompson region, highs of -1. On Thursday, mix of sun and cloud and highs of 8. The weekend looks nice there too. Friday and Saturday, both 8s. And in Churchill, maverick weather as usual. Periods of snow today, blowing snow at times. Winds northwest 50 gusting to 70, and the temperatures falling to -3 this afternoon. Wind chill, oh yeah, they get a wind chill for sure, -12. And tonight in the Churchill region, northwest winds 40 gusting to 60. Boy, sounds like winter all right for Churchill. And on Wednesday, mainly cloudy and highs of -8. Right now, looking around the province, a few temperatures for you. Brandon, 3. Churchill, -2. In Dauphin, it's 4 degrees. Gimli, it's 3 degrees. And in Winnipeg at this hour, it's sunny and 7 degrees. Okay, on our call-in today, we are discussing advance directives for medical assistance in dying and end-of-life care in general. On October the 30th, Quebec became the first Canadian province to allow consideration of advance requests for medical assistance in dying in cases where a person's condition, maybe they have Alzheimer's, might render them incapable of giving consent at a later date. That is, generally speaking, illegal under current federal law. But on October 24th, Federal Health Minister Mark said Ottawa would not be contesting Quebec's law that allows those advance requests for MAID. Instead, the federal government will launch a countrywide consultation on the issue next month, with a report to be published in March 2025. So on today's call-in, we want to hear what Manitobans think about advance directives like those now allowed in Quebec. Right now in Manitoba, consent to MAID usually must be given immediately before the procedure, with an advance directive that would not necessarily be required. It could depend on specific circumstances, and death would take place perhaps months or even years in the future. So what do you think? Are advance directives like those now being allowed in Quebec a good idea or a bad idea? And should laws around MAID respect individual choice? Do you question the move to advance directives based on your concerns about the availability of palliative care? And what does the latest research say about who's accessing MAID? Do you know someone who chose MAID or decided against it? Please share your comments, concerns, and questions by calling me 204-780-0893. That's a lot of talk to get to the point that we are talking today with guest Dorothy Stevens. She is a retired registered nurse and current co-chair of the Winnipeg chapter of the national human rights charity Dying with Dignity. Their stated mission is ensuring access to quality end-of-life choice and care through advocacy, education, and support. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi.
At last, you get a word in edgewise. So tell me, in Manitoba, how do advance directives work right now?
So there's a difference between advance directives and advance requests for MAID. So I just want to clarify that terminology right off the bat, because in Manitoba, an advance directive, that's a general term for a document where you express your wishes for future health care. That's got nothing to do with MAID.
Right.
In Manitoba, we usually call it a healthcare directive, but advance directive is kind of a general term that would be used across the country. And those are provincial, and they are not related to MAID, and the MAID law is federal. So what you're talking about today, what we're talking about today is advance requests for MAID, which is would be a completely different document and completely different request.
Yeah, because I think an advanced care directive would be like, do not resuscitate,
Yes.
I don't want ICU. It's for
Yes.
things you don't want, but it's,
or things you do want.
Or do want,
so
but it's
there's
not...
also a misconception that advance directives are only for people who say, well, I don't want anything done and don't keep me alive with tubes.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of a healthcare directive is to express your wishes for a future care for some kind of illness or emergency, not just end-of-life care.
Yeah.
And it can, if your wishes or beliefs or opinions or values are that you would want everything done,
Mm-hmm.
then that's what you should put in it. It's not just for people who want to refuse care.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So we are going to go straight to our callers, but give us a call. And Dorothy is here, of course, to clarify what is and what isn't going on in the world of advance directives. And also, I would say, point out that everyone should have healthcare directives, because it's not necessarily about what you don't want. It could be about what you do want when it comes to end-of-life care. Do give us a call, 204-780-0893. And we're going to go to Bob on the line. Hi, Bob.
Yes, good afternoon. I want to express my dismay at the federal government's process on this whole issue. It's been studied and it's been done to death. And I would hope that both the Manitoba government and, in fact, every provincial government in the country should thumb its nose at the federal government and do exactly what the Quebec government has done.
And why? You seem to feel strongly about that. What are you basing your opinions on?
Well, I'm basing it on my own hope that I can, at some point, make an advance directive for MAID when I need it, and I can't do that now. And I believe the Supreme Court threw it back to the federal government a few years ago, and I'm pretty disgusted with the federal government. Well, not going along with the Supreme Court decision.
So Bob is correct on that. There have already been a number of studies and reviews and recommendations going back to when MAID was first legalized, and certainly after the last legislative update, and the committee that reviewed it all have made recommendations that advance requests for MAID should be legal, and the polls certainly support that. The majority of Canadians, including the majority of Manitobans, do support that.
So there has been quite a lot of research.
There's been lots of studies, interviews, panels, discussions, recommendations, and the last recommendation certainly was that it should be legal. So, at least the federal government is not saying no, but we're not real sure why they need to review it again either.
All right. So just to get back to the idea of, so how many people, do you have a number, like 50% of people support having advance directives?
Oh, no, it's 80%? Way more than that.
Oh, it is.
It's more like around 80. Mm-hmm. Or 80-ish, depending on the province.
And I see that number supported by an Ipsos Reid poll that was, of course, commissioned by your organization, but at 82%. You are listening to Radio Noon. We're talking about advance directives for accessing MAID. Quebec has recently changed their rules around that, and the federal government has said they will not interfere with that. Give us a call, 204-780-0893, and let us know your thoughts. We're going to go to the phone lines. We have Janine. Hello, Janine.
Yes.
What would you like to say?
I have watched a family member spend 5 years in palliative care, and we began the MAID process when she first went into palliative care, and there were so many hoops to jump through that by the time they finally got around to possibly accepting her request, she was no longer communicative and able to pass a cognitive test in order to actually carry out the procedure. So now we're 5 years in, watching her lie in a bed day in and day out, not being able to communicate, being so drugged up on painkillers to try and keep her comfortable, and it's just heartbreaking. So I, right now, wish I lived in Quebec.
Yes. And do you know, Janine, what this person would have wanted? Did they leave anything while they were still able to do so, like any instructions or opinions?
Absolutely. My mom's biggest fear was that she was going to end up in a personal care home. And she said from a very early age of her early 60s that that was a wish that she never, ever wanted to have happen. She watched my grandparents go through living in personal care homes. And while the care home she is in is absolutely wonderful and very good to their residents, it's just not a place she ever desired to be. My mom was always extremely active and did everything for everyone in the community. And now she has no quality of life whatsoever.
Yes. And this is something I'm hearing a lot of as a baby boomer myself. A lot of people around my age are witnessing the deaths of parents or possibly aunts or uncles that are going through a horrendous experience similar to what Janine has described. And I went through it with my own mother as well, who died in a personal care home after years of Alzheimer's. And that's why I think there's so much support right now for the issue of advance requests, because a lot of us who have lived that with relatives or even friends are saying that we would not want that for ourselves. And we're looking ahead and saying, if this happened to me, I would want. But the problem is that you can't make a request that far into the future. Even with the Quebec law that they are proposing, you still need a diagnosis. So, for instance, I can't say if I get Alzheimer's, then at a certain stage I would want this or that. I would have to already be diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And in the early stages, while I'm still competent, I could then make that advance request. And that's like what Quebec is looking at.
Well, thank you, Janine, very much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And we hope other people will too. And give us your opinions, your comments, your questions about this very interesting and sometimes divisive topic. 204-780-0893. Today we're talking about advance directives when it comes to accessing medical assistance in death. As I mentioned before, Quebec has proposed changing their law and allowing advance directives, and the federal government says that they will make no move to stop it. Dorothy, I wanted to ask you, I've often heard it said that if there was enough palliative care, if there were more resources, if people were more sensitive about palliative care, there would be no need for MAID.
No.
What do you say about that?
No, that's not true. That was especially a big fear early on when MAID was first becoming legalized. And in fact, a lot of people working in palliative care, physicians and nurses, felt I'm gonna say like maybe insecure. I think they felt that if somebody wanted MAID, they must not be doing a good enough job as a doctor or as a nurse in making that person comfortable, and so they were seeing MAID as a failure. But that's not how it's proved at all. The majority of people who are requesting MAID and having MAID already have palliative care or have access to palliative care. It's not an either or. They're absolutely compatible. In fact, the majority of people who are having MAID a lot of them are even already on a palliative care unit. And the reason they're requesting MAID is because it's not about the quality of palliative care or whether or not the doctors and nurses can keep you comfortable. It's really about autonomy and control. A lot of the people who are wanting MAID, it's because they want to die on their own terms. They don't want to go to the bitter end. They don't want to live through the kind of death that they saw somebody else have. They want to control their own destiny.
And how many people, do you have any numbers on this, have actually used medical assistance in dying?
Lots. So I did look up some numbers, and I found that last year in Manitoba alone, there were 366 applications for MAID. Only 236 of those actually took place. And the reason for that, and it's important to note, is because just because you apply doesn't mean you have to go through with it. You're not signing your death warrant when you apply. You can apply if you think you might want it. and then you can decide later once you're approved. So about 100 people either died before ever having it or changed their minds. But 236 actually went through with it. In 2022, it was 223, and that's the trend across the country, is that since it was legalized, the numbers have been climbing fairly steadily. There's the last full statistics were in 2022. For Manitoba, there have been over 1,000 Manitobans as of the end of 2022 who have actually had MAID, and it's about 4% of deaths across the country now. Even higher, I think the highest is BC, and it's like 6 or 7% there. And the reason for that is most commonly believed that because there's a lot of educated people who retire there, and so they have a well-versed, well-read people who follow this stuff and then would want it. Yeah.
Well, it's been raised also that people in marginalized communities might be pressured into choosing MAID rather than being cared for by an overburdened public system. What do you think of that concern?
So is there an overburdened public system? Yes. There, long before MAID was legalized, there have been people with serious illnesses and disabilities who have been underserviced by the healthcare system and who have been living, in some cases, I would say even a miserable existence with substandard housing and home care and all the rest of it. What MAID legislation has done has bring that to light, because these people didn't get any news coverage before. They just existed, and in a lot of cases were just trapped in that scenario. And now that some of them are saying, my life in this system is so bad that I would choose MAID, that's what's making the news. And it is very sad. And yes, there need to be more supports for those people with disabilities and who are marginalized and all the rest of it. And in some ways, it's maybe good that this is now coming to light. But it's really two separate issues here. One is, do they meet the criteria for MAID? Because if they have the serious, illness and suffering and all the rest of it, if they meet the criteria, well, then they meet the criteria. The other system needs to be addressed at the healthcare, the social supports and stuff like that.
Please join our conversation. Give us a call at 204-780-0893, or you can text us at 204-588-7355. And it's also been argued that being able, with an advance directive, to choose a set of circumstances, if not a date in the future, you don't have all the data at the time, that what you think you might want might not be true at the time. And if you're no longer able to make a cognizant decision, you might not be suffering by then. There might be future treatments, and it won't be you making the decisions. And also, I've heard this for the doctors themselves. You say when you don't know your loved ones, you want MAID, and they come to see you in the nursing home, and you're sitting in a sunbeam happily, doing a puzzle or something.
I've heard that too.
And what's your response to that?
So this is a good case for having discussions with your family and your friends and your loved ones, and thinking not just about MAID, but the whole broader issue of advanced care planning for your future health. The most important thing to convey is your wishes, beliefs, and values, and what you consider an acceptable quality of life. Never mind the medicalese. You don't need a bunch of diagnosis and talking about tubes and everything, because none of us knows what's going to happen in the future. Whether it's a terminal illness or something else, none of us can predict that we won't be in a car accident tomorrow and end up with a head injury or in a coma or something. So you should be thinking about this kind of thing in terms of advanced care planning, and not just waiting for the issue of MAID to come up. And one of the most tragic things is when somebody is seriously ill or dying in the hospital and the family has no idea what they would want. And they have nothing written down, or maybe siblings are arguing about whether or not to pull the plug or to keep the treatment going and stuff like that. So you need to have those conversations and indicate your wishes and values clearly, and describe what you consider to be an acceptable quality of life. If I'm ever sitting in a nursing home with Alzheimer's and you find me sitting in front of the TV smiling and say, well, she looks pretty happy. Okay. But to me, if I'm sitting in front of that TV and there's rap music playing on that TV or sports and I'm still smiling, that's not me, because I'm not a sports fan, and nor do I like rap. So just because somebody is smiling doesn't mean that's what, like, I would not consider that an acceptable quality of life. And those are the kind of values and descriptions that you need to provide and
put out
discuss
there.
and put out
so
there.
that people know. We're going to return to the phone lines, and we've just got a few minutes left. Hello. We've got Orion on the phone. Or Orion?
Orion, hi.
Hi, Orion.
How are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm good. I wanted to say my father chose to die via MAID in 2020. And we had talked about MAID many times before, and one of his biggest concerns was developing dementia and wanting to have an advance, I'll just call it an advance directive. I'm sorry about the other term. But it really was really upsetting to him that wasn't an option, because he didn't want a really, really diminished quality of life that he might have with dementia. And also because my mother died of dementia, and what happened in the end with her is she just stopped eating. She reached a certain point of diminishment where she just refused to eat and refused to drink. And the nurses at the time told me this wasn't that uncommon. She'd reached this point, like it was the last decision she could make. And I really felt my mother didn't want to go on the way she was. And I think she worried that the next step, she wouldn't have any choices at all. She wouldn't be able to know she had a choice, in a sense. And then my father certainly knew that. And I think, we don't really know what comes all with dementia, but we do know what people can forecast as what they want in their quality of life. My dad was really clear, and he was really clear when he did make the decision for his life.
Yes. So having lived through that, then, have you thought about your own wishes, and have you done any kind of advanced care planning yourself?
I have done some advanced care planning around, what I want. Obviously, if something, terrible happened, but you've given me food for thought about more to think about.
Yeah.
But I live with a chronic illness, and I'm in pain every day, and that's just not a great time, I've got to tell you.
Yeah.
And it's, there's a lot of diminishment, and I don't know, there might be someday down the line where that might be a choice that I would want to have available to me.
Okay.
So I definitely have thought about it. It's certainly not something I feel the need to have access to now.
Yeah. If you're thinking about it, then this is probably a good time to put a plug in for the Dying with Dignity website. It is a national website, but we do have a Winnipeg chapter page, and there are a number of chapters across the country that all have information. There's all kinds of information and resources on there, not just about medical assistance in dying, but whole packages of information on advanced care planning, including all kinds of little quizzes that you can do to think about your values and what you might want or not want, and information and resources. And for people who are listening who are thinking that they would support advance requests for MAID, which, as I said, is not the same thing as advanced care planning, but if you are a person who supports advance requests for MAID becoming legal, if you look on the website under where it says advocacy, there is a letter writing campaign to let your members of parliament know that you would support that.
And thank you, Orion, for sharing your story. It's good to hear these points of view, and also, as you say, it's plenty of food for thought.
Yeah.
And
could I add one more point?
Sure. We're just running out of time, but absolutely, you may.
At one point, my father thought he had lost his access to MAID, which he hadn't, but he ended up thinking through taking his life in other ways, and he landed in a hospital. I remember talking to a psychiatrist who was quite worried, and he said that a lot of men, particularly, do this because they want to have control over their death. And I just thought that was just a terrible thing.
Yeah.
Because the thought of, finding my father or someone finding my father in his house dead was far worse than MAID.
Well, thank you, Orion, and even more to think about. And it also points out the value of education. And so thank you very much, Dorothy Stevens, for being our guest today. Dorothy Stevens is a retired registered nurse and current co-chair of the Winnipeg chapter of the National Human Rights charity, Dying with Dignity. You're listening to Radio Noon. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you to everyone who gave us a call today. Get out in the sunshine. Cross your fingers for the American election. Enjoy the day. I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.